Keep up with Scottish football with your host, John Turner.
So in this week's episode of the Low Ball Show, I've got former player, manager and assistant manager who has played at clubs such as Celtic, Dundee, Valur. I think I'm saying that right.
Yeah, that's correct, aye.
To name a few, has been manager at teams such as Alloa, Wraith Rovers, Aldershot, and has been the assistant head coach at teams such as Dumbarton and York City, is Barry Smith. Barry, thank you for joining us today.
No problem at all, John.
So I suppose the question I'll guess you get asked all the time is, what was it like to be at Celtic?
That was great. Listen, when I grew up, I grew up in Paisley. Family members were Celtic supporters, but I actually grew up watching St Mirren. But you obviously have an allegiance to certain clubs, and when the opportunity came to sign with Celtic as an S form, I jumped at the chance. It went from there to I decided to stay on school, so I was quite fortunate. I didn't actually do the ground staff at Celtic. I just went straight full time. But I decided I wanted to stay on at school and get hires, which I did, and then got offered a full time contract at Celtic. And it's a dream come true. When you get to play with such a big, or get asked to play for such a big club, and something that as a young boy, you probably dreamt of. So I was really sort of, taken aback the fact that I was getting asked to go full time.
And I mean, I suppose asking to go for, and 1,000%, probably millions of people's dreams to be asked to go full time, just to sign that contract. But I suppose the first time that you stepped onto the park and it was in front of fans, I mean, I would imagine that's a moment that you'll just never forget.
No, well, I mean, I'd been playing with the reserves, even although I was at school, I'd still been involved in it was the West Reserve League at the time, which was played on a Monday night, so I'd played in that. But, the actual, my debut for Celtic as such was against Falkirk, and I didn't have much time to think about it. I get basically a phone call on the Friday. We'd trained, there was a few injuries at the time, but I didn't actually train with the first team. I was training with reserves, preparing for the reserve game, which used to be played, in the afternoon. It was going to be at Parkhead, that particular game. I got a phone call, maybe about tea time, basically saying, no, don't go to the reserve game, you're involved with the first team. So I didn't really have a lot of time to think about it. I come on as a sub at Brockville. I actually come on at left back, which wasn't my position, but when you're going to play with first team, it doesn't matter who you're playing with, but particularly Celtic, you'll play anywhere, so yeah. I just cranked my left leg up and went on and played there, so.
And from there, and the reason I kind of picked this up so quickly is because you went to Dundee, and I'm sure, hopefully you'll agree that Dundee was probably the biggest club. The club you spent so much time with. You've got the amount of appearances. You're held in very high regard. I believe I'm correct in saying you went into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that's
Dundee,
right.
As well. So you spent so much of your career with. How did that move come about?
Well, I mean, I'd been at Celtic for, I think I signed in 1990, and it was 95, December 95 when I left. And, I think in the 5 years I'd played about 20 games. Now, when it comes down to it, as a player, nobody wants to leave Celtic. I don't really, nobody wants to leave Celtic, but when it comes down to it, I wanted to play football. And at the time, Tommy Burns was the manager, and I remember them pulling me in and saying, listen, we're going to do a deal with Dundee. Morton V. Course is coming the opposite way. You're going to Dundee. And I didn't agree with him because I still wanted to fight for my place at Celtic. But Tommy being Tommy, you know, a very shrewd guy. I've got a lot of time and respect for him. Knew what was best for me at that point, and he was correct. You know, for as much as I didn't want to leave Celtic, I needed to play games. At the age I was, I needed to play games. And when I went to Dundee, you know, everything happened after that, you know, was the correct choice at the time. And Tommy knew that, you know, so it was one of the ones I didn't agree with him at the time. But because of the type of guy that he was, he knew what was best for me, you know.
And I suppose just kind of finally touch on with the kind of Celtic part. What was that like when, you know, he told you that that's what he thought was best, and then just that kind of moment after it was it kind of, you know, were you upset, annoyed, or just wanting to get on with it?
I was probably, I mean, every emotion runs through. You're upset because you don't want to leave the club. You're annoyed because I guess you feel you've failed to a certain degree, you know, because ultimately I signed with Celtic, I wanted to play in their first team on a regular basis. So there's a lot of emotions going through that. But I think once I went up to, you know, it's quite tough. And I think a lot of players that leave Celtic find it tough. You know, a lot of the guys that I played with actually left, you know, whether it was a reserve team or had been bit part of the, you know, the first team and really struggled. But I always felt that when I left that if I didn't give my best shot, then I wasn't being true to myself, you know. And you know, when I went to Dundee, I knew I had to. It was like a new start, and I had to, you know, prove myself to, you know, the Dundee fans and the manager Jim Duffy. He was brilliant to me. He was absolutely brilliant when he brought me in. You know, so I took up the challenge, and you know, thankfully, you know, it took me to where I ended up.
And you know, you spent just over 10 years.
Yeah.
At Dundee. I mean, what was that like? Because you probably see it a lot now as well, that it's, you know, it's few and far between where players spend so long at clubs. Was it just everything you were happy with, everything around you was going well, and you just wanted to remain?
I think you know, it's easy to, you know, say like the grass is always green on the other side, you know. But to me, I was enjoying my football. I enjoyed the managers I was playing under. I was, you know, I felt I was well paid. I wasn't. I'm not somebody that goes chasing money. I always felt that you know, sometimes happiness is more important. And I was always happy at Dundee, so I never actually, you know, wanted to go anywhere. There was a couple of chances probably to move on, but I decided that was the best place for me. And you know, it's. I think there was, you know, I played under quite a few managers, and it was always a challenge because you had to prove yourself to the new manager coming in. And I always liked that challenge. You know, some folk are scared of the challenge and, you know, maybe shy away and would rather move away and go and play somewhere else. I quite like the challenge. You know, try to impress somebody different.
And I'm right in saying you captained there quite a lot as well. And
I was made captain when I was 21, 22, and pretty much stayed as captain for, you know, the rest of the time I was there. And I wasn't a shouter, you know, I wasn't. People just, I think, looked at me in the standard that I set, whether it was in training or on the pitch. And I try to set as high a standard as possible, and you know, you just hope that everybody would follow.
And you know, in being captain, what kind of responsibilities does that put upon you?
No, I think you're probably closer to the assistant manager and the manager than most players. That there's a sort of respect there that, you know, players are always looking for something, you know, so they always look to the captain to go and ask the manager, whether it was for more money, for bonuses, or, you know, a night out, or, you know, they look to the captain. And, you know, that's just part and parcel of being the captain, I guess. You've got that, the respect to the players and, you know, the respect to the manager, that you can go and speak to them and see what can be done. You don't always get the answer that you're looking for, which quite a lot. But you know, I think you just have a sort of closer relationship with the manager than what, you know, the rest of the team probably do.
And I suppose, based on you saying it, I feel like I need to ask, what was it like going to the manager and asking for a night out?
It depends what manager it was. Some of the managers would have came the night out ways, you know. But I think, you know, it depends why you were asking for the night out. Yeah, I guess sometimes the boys just wanted a night out. Sometimes the manager would maybe see it as a chance for some team bonding and, you know, getting the boys together, having something to eat and a couple of drinks, you know, and would benefit the team. Others just didn't agree with it. And you just always, you know, if I went and asked the question and it was a no, then you respect that because the managers always get their own reasons for it, you know. But 9 times out of 10, the majority would have said, you know, get them together, we'll organise like paintball or, you know, go-karting or, you know, and the boys can have a night out after it, you know. So the majority were, you know, fine with it.
And I suppose now, being at Dundee for the length of time you were, I mean, you were finalists in the Scottish Cup. You won the first division 97, 98?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, what were they kind of memories like?
we won when we won the league in 97, 98. We won it quite early. We won it at Raith Rovers. I think there was about 4 or 5 weeks still to go, and I think we were lucky if we won another game after it because the boys were out celebrating for the rest of the season. I actually travelled, like I was still in Paisley, and I travelled with James Grady, Eddie Annand, Ian Anderson, and, you know, Stevie McCormick. And, you know, we used to sort of meet up. And, I mean, we were quite close just because we spent that much time in the car together. But, I mean, the amount of nights out we had between the winning the league and going to the end of the season was incredible. But, you know, the rest of the boys in Dundee were the same. You know, like with a real, that's probably one of the best dressing rooms I've been in terms of closeness and a group that just worked for each other. And, you know, we worked hard for each other, you know, on the park, but we also enjoyed our company off the park as well.
And just, you know, before you won the league and in the kind of weeks building up, you know, to actually winning it, when you realise, you know, this, you know, we're getting closer and closer. What's that like? Because I'm assuming, obviously, there must reach up. I know when everybody says take it one game at a time, but I'm assuming there must be a point where, you know, you as a player, as a captain, look and go, you know what, we are very close to this now.
There probably is, but I think the fear of no doing it probably keeps you going. You know, because you want it done as quickly as possible. And as I say, fortunate for us, I think it was 4 games to go. We won the league at Kirkcaldy, and we actually drew the game to win the league. But I think that, you know, until you're actually over the line, you know, there's still that wee bit of nervousness that, you know, into every game. And that was a good squad. You know, we won the league relatively comfortably that year. And there was, you know, quite a few good teams in the league as well. So it was until you actually win it, you know, I think there's always that wee bit of nervousness that, you know, you need to get across the line before anything else.
And the closer you got, you know, to mathematically winning it, was the changing room just the same to be in, or could you tell there was a bit of people kind of looking?
No, I think, you know, the closer you got, there was obviously every game you knew that the next, you know, in the weeks leading up to it, you know, you knew you were getting closer, and there was, you know, that wee bit of excitement, but there was also that determination, you know, to make sure that we did get across the line. And, you know, as I say, it was a good group that pushed each other. And with, you know, as I say, with 2 good strikers, you know, 3, 4, 5 good strikers. in that team that all contributed. We had a solid defence, and it was a good midfield. It was just a good overall team that actually did very well in the first season back in the Premier League as well. So, but I think there is excitement in the dressing room, but everybody just, especially that group, just wanted to push each other over the line.
Yeah, and I suppose I need to ask, obviously with the nights out and getting into Paisley and stuff, was there a favoured place that you went?
Well, the rest of the boys were in Glasgow, so we used to go to One Up, I think it was called, and
right, yep.
That was the sort of place, if we were all going out together, that's the sort of place we would all meet up. And there was many a good night had in there.
Don't worry, I won't ask too much about those. But when you come back, to the pre-season after winning the league, after getting the promotion, what was the feeling like? And the reason I ask is because, historically, when you look and you see, for example, if the pundits put out their thoughts or the bookmakers put out their odds, the team that get promoted are always thought to be, a chance at getting relegated. What was the kind of, for you though, as a player, when you get back in and you get back into pre-season, what's the kind of head, like the mindset?
Again, you're getting into a bit of the unknown because a lot of the boys hadn't played in the Premier League. So there's Jockey was the manager at the time. They brought in, 5 or 6 guys to improve the team, which they did. But the sort of underlying thing, we went to Magaluf at the end of the season as customary. You win the league, you go to Magaluf. Went to Magaluf, and it was a year Hearts won the Scottish Cup as well. So we bumped into them in a nightclub, or just a bar, sorry, it was a bar in Magaluf. And a couple of their boys had said to us, and it was just a bit of banter, but it stuck with us. They says that, there's 12 points for us next season. Now, that stuck. I don't know if you know Robert Douglas, he's a good friend of myself. That stuck with Robert, and he pinned it up on the board. Just remember what one of the other teams in the league said about us. And that sort of spurred us on, because we actually, I think we beat Hearts 4 times that season, which, given what they'd said, and it was just banter, but it's something that stuck with a lot of us that were there, and we wanted to prove people wrong. So, for as much as there was, we actually started very poorly, when we went into the league. But I think we just get used to the pace of the game, and I think we finished in the 5th, which is the highest that Dundee's ever finished in the Premier League. So, it turned out a very good season.
Yeah, and and I know there's been stuff in between which I'll kind of come back to, but just to touch on when you got put into the Dundee's Hall of Fame. I mean, how do you find out about that? Do you get like a phone call? Does somebody?
It was in advance, obviously, because they're inviting you to the Hall of Fame dinner.
Yeah.
But it was basically just a phone call to say that I think it was the first time Dundee had their Hall of Fame. So there was 5 of us inducted at the first night, and I was one of them. That's given how long I've been there, it's just a proud moment for myself and my family. The fact that you get inducted, one of the first inductees into the Hall of Fame. And I don't see myself as that type of, I always feel sort of fortunate that I was able to have such a good career at Dundee and enjoy some special times there, so it's sort of it took me back, the fact that I was getting invited, or I was getting inducted into it, you know.
And when you kind of went and you were inducted, and I hope you don't mind me asking this, but with the kind of what you had achieved, and then, you know, obviously, and like a lot of clubs, you know, in years gone by had went through kind of troubled times and things. Was it good to kind of be recognised for maybe perhaps closer to what you might have thought people had forgotten?
It's hard to explain. I mean, when I look at the guys that are inducted, you know, into the Hall of Fame, I look at them and go, they deserve to be. I'm like, I sort of still look and go, I was lucky to, you know, I never saw myself as a star on the pitch. I just went and done my job, and, you know, worked hard for the team and made sure that every day I went into work that I gave my all. So it's hard to explain that, you know, for me to be like Bobby Cox was like one of my. He looked after me when I was up there. He was just an ambassador. He was a massive player for Dundee, and to get mentioned in the same breath as him, I don't think I deserve to. You know, because he won the league and stuff like that. You know, the first division when Dundee won it. So it's quite difficult to explain, because I've got so much respect for the guys that have been inducted, and I don't see myself at that level, you know, that they were at.
I mean, and you know, I wasn't going to bring this up now, but what I will bring up is, you know, as I said to you before, I do this quite a lot, and I kind of chat around, and on occasions, a lot of the time when I've got a guest coming on, I will kind of put out on thoughts and stuff that people had, and I had some responses, and this isn't just from, like, you know, players or anything like that. This is also from, like, some fans as well, and I had things about work costs with applauses. One of the nicest guys to come out of Dundee, considering it's a shithole.
Well, that's a bit harsh, but
Which I do agree with, a bit harsh, but I did want to tell you, if I need to cut that out, I'll cut it out. We had led the club well, played with his heart in his sleeve, and that was, I'll be honest, I probably get just over 40 responses for it, and that was generally the consensus was work course, heart in your sleeve, and put everything out there.
I think everybody knew what they were getting off me. I was consistent. I would do the job pretty much that was asked where it was, and some players might be ashamed to say it, but I always felt that I won the ball and gave it to somebody that was better. I would do the dirty work and give it to somebody that was better on the ball than me, which you need guys like that in your team.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what, you know, and I'm not ashamed to say that I was one of the players that I would quite happily win the ball and give it to somebody else that, you know, I knew would be more constructive with it. Didn't say that, it didn't mean that I was a bad player in the ball. I just knew that some guys were better with it than me. So I was quite happy passing it on and letting them do their stuff.
And do you know, I will say, and out with this, it's been a conversation I've had with people a lot, and I think that is probably the most underrated player in the team, is the person that does the dirty work and passes it on to that guy that's going to make the mazy run or the 30-yard pass, but everyone forgets the guy that won the ball to start that. And it's something that I do talk about quite a lot, is that person's always forgotten, but without that person, the stuff in front of it never happens.
Yeah. But the thing is, I didn't mind being. I was more a team player than an individual. So I didn't really mind somebody else getting all the credit. You know, as long as the manager picked me the following week and I was in the team and he recognised what I was doing for the team, then that was probably enough for me, you know.
Yeah. And to then, and I suppose you've probably had this before, but I feel like I need to ask. From Dundee to Iceland, I mean, was it not cold enough in Dundee for you?
I mean, a lot of folk thought it was a strange decision. To be honest, there was a sort of the last two games of that season. Alan Kernan had lost his job, and myself and Bobby Mann took the team for the last two games of the season. So I knew a new manager was coming in, and if I was being honest with myself, I probably the season that just passed, I'd felt I'd went stale myself. I'd been at Dundee 11 years, and a new manager was coming in. At that point, I knew myself I had to move on, just to get freshness. You know, I've been 11 years at Dundee, and to freshen myself up, I thought now's the time to move on. A new manager's coming in, give him a free rein, you know, whatever he wanted to do. I was at an age that could be seen as a threat. I know that's what I would have been, because it's never the way I've worked, whether I've been a manager or a player. I've never been a threat to anyone. But a new manager coming in might have thought that. So I made the decision pretty quickly. I actually made the decision the Thursday before the last game of the season, and I was away. I was in Iceland by the Tuesday because their season started.
And you know, everything you've said obviously makes complete sense, and that now I understand why. But how Iceland? How did Iceland come about? Did you know somebody or?
I don't know if you remember Davy Winnie, that play. Actually, I played with Davy at Dundee. It was a strange scenario. He was studying law at the Paisley University, and my dad was a library custodian. So they sort of spoke to each other, you know, quite regular in the library. And he'd played in Iceland as well, and he'd managed in Iceland, so he had a lot of good connections over there. And he just said to my dad, "What's Barry thinking about doing at the end of the season?" And he said, "Well, I think my dad had said to him, well, he's not sure, he's out of contract." And Davy phoned me and said, "Listen, there's an offer, a contract at Valur in Iceland. Do you fancy trying it?" And I thought, well, at that stage of my career, if it was an opportunity to go abroad and try something different, then why not? And I spoke to my wife and said, "Listen, this is an opportunity that I'm not really want to turn down." And I've been really lucky. My wife's been brilliant. She, whatever like I tend to decide, she's right behind me, and you know, beside me on the plane across there. So decided that was the best opportunity for us, and off I went.
So, sorry, your wife, she went with you as well?
She went after 10 weeks. Well, like she stayed. I gave her the good job of selling the house and stuff like that. So she stayed, sold up her house in Dundee, and she came across, and you know, to Iceland, and I was there for 3 years, but you know, came home every after their season finished, and I tended to try and get a loan deal back in Scotland, so that I kept myself fit until their season started again in May.
Yeah. And sorry, the reason I'd ask, because obviously when I've done this a lot, and I'm assuming it must have been a much easier move when you had your kind of wife with you, when somebody kind of there, because a lot of the time I hear players saying they went but the family stayed, and there was a bit of that kind of, you know, feeling of distance.
But I guess, you know, I've got a young boy now, part of like my son, and when I went to Canada, my wife and my son never came with me, and the biggest reason for coming back was because I wanted to be closer to them. So when I went to Iceland, my wife, you know, I mean, thankfully she gave up her job as well. She had a good job and she gave it up just to come with me. But when I went to Canada just a couple of years ago, I didn't want to take my wee one out of school. Because what football's like, you could be there 6 months and then you're on the plane back. So I wanted him to stay at a good school, and I wanted him to stay at that. So my wife looked after him 24/7. So that I can see why, if you've not got family there, it can be a struggle. In Iceland it wasn't, because my wife was there, but when I went to Canada, I did struggle with it.
And if I just kind of look further ahead, when you then kind of stopped playing and started to get into kind of coaching and managing, was that always a pathway that you were looking to take?
I guess the older I got, the more I was interested in coaching. I'd started doing a wee bit in Iceland, taking the 18s and getting involved. I didn't have any licenses at that point. But my last year, Jockey had took over at Dundee again, and he phoned us up and says, "Listen, we're needing somebody in to take the under 18s at Dundee." And I decided at that point that was the way forward for me. If I had to give up playing, then I would give up playing. But fortunately, Jock had said that if I wanted to continue playing part-time, he didn't have a problem as long as, I was doing my job at Dundee. So ended up staying and playing with Brecon, signing with Brecon. But it was Jockey sort of, he said to us, he says, "Listen, get your licenses done as quick as possible. We'll give you help." And but I was grateful for him giving us the opportunity to get into coaching, because it's no easy, to get yourself in and then continue to be educated with him, Jockey, and his assistant at the time was Ray Farnham, who I learned a lot of for both of them.
Yeah. And then when you stepped into the kind of first team manager role, how was that?
It was awful. Just given the circumstances, it was awful. But again, it's something that, you're given an opportunity, and sometimes you don't get a second one. And at that point, I thought, well, somebody's going to have to do it. If it's not me, somebody else will, come in and take the team from, obviously they were in administration at the time. I was always thankful that Billy Dodds and Gordon Chisholm had pulled me and said, "Listen, if you get offered it, take it," because they were losing their jobs. And they were good enough to say to us, "If you get offered it, take it." So I'll always remember that. But once you're in this, once you get the job, then you've just got to go on with it. And it was extremely tough, because you were having to pick up a team that had pretty much been, let down by off the field matters more than anything else. But we managed to galvanise them and get them to realise that they weren't just playing for themselves; they were playing for the guys that lost their jobs, and the staff that had lost their jobs. It was all for them and the fans. It was their club, So that all these things put together, and we managed to get it right. We managed to involve everyone, and we got it right on the park, and it took us to where we ended up that season.
Yeah. And, in kind of your managing there, was that, from what had happened and the circumstances surrounding it, could you then start to, at the kind of end of that season, see there being a way through it, for not just for, yourself and the team, but for the club as a whole?
I think, I was, close to the chief executive at the time, and he kept me informed of everything that was going on. The administrator, Brian Jackson, pretty much left us to it. He knew, I think, Brian knew that if he got results on the park, there was always a chance that the club could be, saved from basically liquidation rather than administration. So he just left us to it, and as the games went on and the run we were on and how well we'd done, we were always, we were never confident, but we sort of had an idea that at the end up it would come good, just because of what was happening on the park, and the terrific support that we had, for backroom staff and office staff and the fans. They were going to make sure that we were able to get a team on the park and that the club was going to survive, through administration.
And I know you'd from there, you kind of moved on, but your next job, I think I'm right in saying, and kind of first team managing was at Alloa.
Yeah. Alloa was a terrific job. The chairman there was brilliant. What you'll find with me, John, is I tend to get on with all the chairmen, that I've worked for, and we have our disagreements, and but there is, I think, always respect. I'm just an honest guy that calls it how it is. Some guys like it, some guys don't, but they know they've got to get honesty and integrity from us, and Mike was Mike just he would just let me go on with controlling the team, doing what I had to do with the team, and he could see that there was a progression and that the team were surviving in the championship at the time, which was the second season. I managed to keep them up in the first season. The second season had Hibs, Hearts and Rangers in it. It was an incredible week to be involved in. So, but Mike was quite happy. He just wanted to be the best part-time team in Scotland, which, being in the championship 9 times out of 10 you were, but Dumbarton were doing particularly well at that stage as well, and I think they were above us, but he was happy being in the championship.
And just to kind of sidestep and kind of touch on the leagues, I mean, obviously over the years we've seen the kind of structure change, and now we've got the pyramid system there. And kind of your eyes, how do you think that setup works?
The pyramid system's the right system. I just think it can be a wee bit more. Also, I'm based in Dundee now, so what I find is that if a Dundee club, one of the junior teams or local teams, want to get into the pyramid system, they've then got to get into the Highland League or the Lowland League. But if you're based in Dundee, the travelling that's involved in that, financially, it's not worthwhile. So my idea, a suggestion would be that they have a Lowland League, a Highland League, but also have a Midland League, so that the teams from Dundee, sort of central, some of the sort of East Coast teams, the Fife teams, have all got a league to play in that still allows them that they're not getting crucified financially by having to do all the travelling. I mean, it's been really tough for Brecon, I think, the amount of travelling they've got. They've done brilliant to win the league last year.
Yeah.
But they're having to spend a fortune basically on travelling expenses, which, I think if they were based in a Midland League, it would probably help a lot better, and it would give them a fairer chance to compete against, some of the guys that spend good money in the Lowland League and the Highland League. And,
just to kind of touch on what you'd said in regards to travel, I mean, Kevin Mackey, obviously director at Brecon, I speak to, he's been on the show, and 100% agree with you, fantastic kind of job they've done there. But I think not just with him, but with many people that I've spoke to, that either play or manage or have had some involvement within that league have all turned around and says the travelling.
Yeah.
With players being part-time and things as well, they're working during the day and then, trying to get away early or a day off to then go travelling, halfway across the country to play a game and then come back for work the next day.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real tough ask for players, because you're then not able to attract maybe some Central Belt players either that maybe give you the majority of players are Central Belt based. That's where most teams go to for their players. And if you're Brecon, you can't really get the Aberdeen players because Cove's there, Aberdeen's there, Forfar, Montrose. They'll go to other teams rather than a Brecon, But if you then say, well, actually, you're not going to do as much travelling, you're just going to be based in the sort of like Fife, Dundee, Edinburgh, then you're probably able to attract more and better players and give yourself a fairer chance of getting yourself back up into the leagues.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things I didn't know, and it was Kevin Mackey being on that it kind of informed me of that, was them winning that league, they get no money.
No, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy. They've worked hard all season. The clubs put out a lot of money financially, and they get basically the reward is that you get an opportunity, a very tough opportunity to get into the league.
Yeah.
So it's quite incredible that there isn't actually a financial reward for all the hard work and the money and finances that have been put out throughout the season.
And I think it shows you how tough it is when none of the teams that have ever went out of League Two have come back up.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the Lowland League, it's got Cowden, Beastbury, Rangers, East Stirling, all teams that have Albion Rovers are in it now, all teams that have left league football, and they've found it extremely, and that's probably credit to the standard of the teams that are in there, that they've got good players and they've got good coaches, and there's a standard there that is doing very well, because you look at Bonnyrigg, Spartans this year, they've not looked at a place in League Two, and in fact they're doing very well, so it just shows that there is, the standard in their leagues is comparable. I just think it would be fairer to give everybody an opportunity to actually get into the leagues rather than it's very difficult to get into the leagues now. With the pyramid system, there must be a different way of giving a better opportunity.
Yeah, and I agree, because obviously just because we touched on Brecon, who are again this season doing really well, who potentially, and I know there's a long way to go, but could potentially win the league again and not get promoted again.
Yeah, and where is the reward for winning the league? It's. I think there's got to be another way of doing it. And listen, there's teams that that everybody's got to look after their own club. That's the one thing I would say. If you're voting something, then you've got to look after your own club first and foremost. And I'm guessing that's why there's not been a lot of movement in the way it's done. But with the same token, somebody maybe higher up has to say, well, what's the best way for, to reward teams that are actually winning leagues? I've been in football 20 odd years, and won one league. There should be players that have never won anything, and there's new guys that are winning leagues, but actually get nothing for it. It seems ridiculous that that's the situation that we're in.
Because you wonder as well, again, just with the situation at Brecon and what had happened last season, that does it really feel like a league win?
But I think ultimately, you've got to win the league, but then you've got another 4 games to actually get into the league. So it's, I guess, everybody's in it to win it. and players will want to put themselves against the best teams and try and get themselves into the league. It's just very difficult to actually get into the leagues at the moment.
Yeah. And I know what you're saying about you being round about Dundee. I mean, is that a club that you still kind of go and watch frequently?
I try to go to a lot of the local teams. I go to Dundee. I take my wee one there, but you know, we've been up at Arbroath quite a few times. We've got to Forfar and Trowes. I just like to, if I'm gonna, I tend to see what game I actually fancy. I think's going to be a good game, and I'll, you know, just take a drive up to whatever game's closest.
Yeah.
So I do go and watch Dundee, but also like to watch the local clubs as well.
And can I ask, with being in the Hall of Fame, does that give you any perks for when you get back?
No, but in fairness, the past year I've been invited back up a few times to go into one of the lounges and speak to, you know, the supporters that have paid for their, you know, 3-course meal and stuff like that. So I've been invited back up, and you know, if I ever need a ticket, then I know that if I phone the right person, they'll, you know, definitely get one. You just have to make sure you get the right person in at the right time.
Just need to make sure you're willing to go in and chat to a few supporters for half an hour.
I've never got a problem with that, right enough, because they were good to me, so that was never a problem.
And I suppose just kind of the final part in this would be asking you, and I know we'd kind of touched on your kind of managerial career and things, but now in moving forward, is it still something that you've got a kind of hunger and desire to do, or?
I don't think that ever leads you. I think you always, you know, I mean, I've been involved in football for, you know, X amount of years, and I don't think that ever leads you. You always want to be involved. And sometimes it's, you know, it doesn't matter what level, you just want to help. 9 times out of 10, I've went and helped either an under 18s team or an under 16s team at Dundee, you know, just to keep myself involved. But you know, if other opportunities come up, then you know, I'd definitely be interested in, you know, because I still feel I've got a lot to offer. You know, whether it's as a manager, assistant manager, or youth coach, I still feel I've got a lot to offer to, you know, the footballing world. It's just getting that next opportunity to arise.
Yeah, and you know, again, and this is not only a point where I would have said to you about me putting the message out and the stuff I was getting back, but you know, just to kind of touch on, I mean, and I'm very honest when I do this. Sometimes it's worked for me, as you've said, in your career, and sometimes it's worked against me. But and honestly, in saying, when I had put a few things out about yourself, and I'm going to be honest, and I hope you don't take this wrong, mate. I was surprised that it was the quickest people had get back to me. That was the surprise. Not for, and I'll be honest in saying, and then when I started reading, but it was how quickly people had came back, because so many times I'll put it out and I'll maybe wait a day, you know, a few hours a day, maybe just over a day, whatever it may be. But in this occasion, I put it out kind of late afternoon, and by 8-9 o'clock at night, I had all these responses. Which I'm going to be very honest and say is the first time I've had that. I've had responses quick before, but not to the level that I'd had. So, you know, it's just to say that what you were saying earlier in regards to, you know, being put in the same breath as other people, you know, I very much think that from the, you know, kind of speaking to yourself and kind of speaking to other people and seeing that that's the level that they, especially at Dundee, put you in. And I'm very honest when I do this, you know, I very much learned that, you know, throughout my kind of research and looking into stuff and putting things out. It became very apparent very quickly.
I mean, it's very humbling from my point of view, because I just see myself as a wee boy from Paisley that was, did well for himself. I'm happy with what I've done, and I'm glad that so many people, still take the time to speak to me. So that's just the way I look at things. It's very humbling that folk think so highly of me. And that I'm sort of taken aback still by that, because I don't see myself in that as that type of guy.
And just to say that the one thing that we actually do have in common is I grew up in Paisley.
Oh, did you?
My dad, but I don't stay there now. But my dad is from Paisley, so I kind of spent a lot of years going to school and parting things in Paisley. So I remember, although I've been to the new Love Street, I still remember the old Love Street.
Yeah.
Which, in a complete side note, the one thing that used to always freak me out there was the steep stairs behind the goals. That'll never not freak me out.
We just playing the race course, and then in a Saturday afternoon, and we'd always they opened the gates at half time, so we would come in the back end to see the second half. Once the youth football was finished.
Yeah.
I used to do that when I was growing up.
And just the very kind of final part is not so much football related, but just a couple of quick questions.
Don't be expecting quick responses.
Don't worry, I can edit it and make it look like you were on point. But as I said, just a couple of quick questions, and it's just a kind of round up. So, your favourite TV show?
To be honest, I'm one of the guys that watches sport all the time. So it's QI. There you go.
Favourite film?
I don't watch movies.
Well, I'll be honest, I'm very much the same. I don't know how I would answer that. Favourite type of food?
I'll have to go for a chippy.
Chippy. What from the chippy? Is it fish?
It's fish supper every day of the week.
Favourite player you've played with?
There's a few. I mean, I was fortunate.
You can name a few. You can name a few.
I was fortunate enough to play with Paul McStay, who to me was unbelievable. Just a great guy, but a great player, but he was a great guy as well. I learned a lot from Tony Mowbray while I was at Celtic in the reserves, but I was also lucky enough to play with Kanija and Georgie Nimzadze at Dundee, and the two of them were outstanding players.
Favourite player you've played against?
In terms of, I found it easy. In terms of...
Well, actually, that's a very good way of looking at it. But even a player that you looked at and thought, wow, they're talented.
The two that spring to mind is I played in an Old Firm game against Brian Laudrup, and I could not get close to him. He was just outstanding. If I went tight, he went in behind me. If I stayed off him, he was able to get the ball and get past me. He was just, I couldn't get close to him. But the guy that probably gave me most problems was Henrik Larsson. He seemed to be elusive. You thought you were marking him, and the next thing he'd be 10 yards away from you. And he was just, his movement was brilliant. His work ethic was, second to none. I remember playing against him at Dens, and Celtic got a player sent off. I think it was in about the 20th minute, and he went and played left wing. I think he actually got took off with cramp because he'd ran that much. And Celtic won the game 1-0 that day. But he was just, his movement was brilliant, and his finishing and everything that went with his, his teamwork was, second to none.
And finally, if there was a team that you wished you'd played for but never did?
St Mirren,
I'm going to be honest and say that's the one time that I've ever asked that question. I was quite confident in what the answer was going to be. And the last question would be if there was a film made about your life, who would you like to play you?
To be honest, because I don't watch movies, I don't know many actors. So it would be that's a hard one, John.
I mean, trust me as well, if you had seen the list of some of the answers that I've had throughout the time of doing this podcast, you would have thought that some people that gave me the answers were delusional. And and others were maybe just, still clinging on to something from years gone by.
I think most people would probably say Victor Meldrew, because everybody sees me as this grumpy guy that just moans about a lot. So I think it would have to be Richard Wilson, just because he's played Victor Meldrew and I'm probably as grumpy as him. Or that's what most people see anyway. I'm always smiling on the inside. It just doesn't tell my face yet.
Look, Barry, I really do appreciate you taking the time to come on. Hopefully down the line, because I do feel as well that there's probably a lot of areas that we could have got into and touched on that we never did. So, at some point down the line, it would be great if you ever wanted to come back. I'm sure there's a lot of kind of untouched stuff and untold stories there. But in the time that you've spent today and this evening, I really do appreciate it, mate. Thank you.
No, thanks for having us on, John, and any time at all.
No problem at all. Thank you.